Hello and welcome to this video about Worldographer and one of the features about it in more detail. What we're going to talk about here is the configuration of settlement data and how to set that up. I'm Joe Wetzel, the creator of the program, and thanks for your attention, thanks for your interest, and hopefully this will let you make cities of different genres. That's the main point of what you're trying to do here, although it also works for allowing you to create maps with additional icon sets that are in the same genre. So I'm going to be showing you how to set all that up. One of the things that you need to do beforehand is you install your icons that you're going to be using for the map that aren't built in. We give you a couple hundred building icons, mostly in the fantasy, medieval genre, but there's a few that are modern and a few that are science fiction as well. And then we sell icon packs with a couple hundred for each of the other genres, post-apocalyptic as well, Western, and so forth. So what you do in order to set that up, what you see in front of you, I should say first, is that this map is the medieval icon set that's built in to Worldographer, and after you've generated a map, which you'll see in a moment, you get something like that. This happens to have our dense setting on. When you create a map, you can say that you want a dense building structure, and so in the city center that tries to jam a bunch of buildings closer together than further out. You can see the difference there. So the first thing to point out to you is where to put the icons when you've downloaded our icon pack, or they are just PNG images. We size them so that they're about 300 pixels per hex, if you will. So if you want a house that's on the same scale as ours, you want to make them about 250 pixels across or so. You can see how the hex is there. And in Worldographer, you're always able to zoom in and out, so you can see, like, if you want to see the detail here, right now they're set up, well, before they were 40 pixels across, now they're 60 pixels and so forth, and you can get into the detail, and you can see that actually these icons are made to be printed even at a scale of 1 inch per hex. You could see the detail really holds up for the style that we've chosen. Anyway, so where to put the icons when you've got them? You can go to this Show Configuration folder, and that's going to show you the default location where it puts things, which is C, your user directory, your username, and then you would create a Worldographer folder. And then inside of that Worldographer folder, if you want to make these buildings that you put on a map, you're going to put them in a Features subfolder and then a Structure subfolder of that. And that's where they would go. And we have information about this written out on our website, worldographer.com. Look for the instructions to get the details about all this. So you can change that, though. If for some reason there's a few people have reported permissions issues with that folder, you can go to Change Configuration Folder, which will bring up a dialog, and then you can change it to whichever folder you'd like. So with that out of the way, we're going to go to the Configure Settlement Data. This is where you go to change all that information that's related to it. So telling the system what buildings exist and which ones are important, what frequency to put them down, what the price lists are for stores and things like that, all comes in this settlement data. And right now we've got the medieval stuff set up right now. So to change it to a new icon, a new data file, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to have one available right away as simultaneously with me essentially posting this video for the modern set that I've been working on, and then we'll be putting out a data file that works for the post-apocalyptic and science fiction icon sets and Western icon sets as well. Medieval, the other medieval set that we sell with more options, and the fantasy set. Those are the ones that we have right now. And then we also, through our Patreon, I should point out, we've got a number. Every month we do a smaller pack. Excuse me, I got getting over a little bit of a cold, but we put out a smaller icon set each month through Patreon for city icons, as well as another set for world icons that are in an isometric style, world icons in a classic style, and then dungeon icons. Those are all through our Patreon, which is patreon.com, I think, /inkwallideas. Anyway, So we want to override these settings with a new configuration, and it asks us, are we going to keep the prior data, which you would leave checked if you're just trying to add to it. So if you're trying to add fantasy icons to the medieval one, the medieval ones that are built in, then you can leave that as keep or add to the prior data. But we're going to clear it because we don't want to mismatch our medieval and modern set. And so we go there, and then we pick our new icon XML file for the icon set, and it tells us to reopen the dialog in order to see the changes. So we go back to configure settlement data, and here we are. And so now I'll talk about these in a bit of detail. I have talked about these in prior videos, but for now, let me try to be relatively quick to go over this. This building placement tab, this determines what special buildings are put on your map. All these things are special that have a particular frequency that you want, because you don't want to have too many office buildings or too many. There's a football stadium. You don't want to have you don't want to put a football stadium on a smaller town, for example. You want to have some size to that town before you put it there. Anyway, so so these keys power that, and what this does, these keys do like a matching where any icon that has modern factory in the name is going to match for this, unless there's a special, if you had a special type of modern factory, modern I'm trying to think of an example, modern plastics factory. Okay, so if you had a separate icon for that and you wanted to have that with a separate entries and everything, then you could add modern plastics factory. Modern plastics, actually what you want to do is you'd want to call it modern factory plastics, probably, because then if you don't put in an entry for modern factory plastics here, it's going to fall back on the modern factory, if you will, because modern factory would still match, whereas if we called it modern plastics factory, there wouldn't be a match. So that's what the key does, and you'll see that's also used for building details as well when we get to that. Population, number per population is how many of these we're going to put down per people in the town. So if there's 5,000 people in the town, we're going to have 10 factories, most likely. Although sometimes a factory can be larger, and sometimes you have a number of collisions, and after it tries several times to place a factory or a larger building, and if it fails a number of times, it'll move on to the next thing. So you might not get excuse me, you might not get all 10. And then if you have, so if you only have 500, you're only going to have one, and then once you hit 1,000 people, you're going to have 2 of these factories. Is it on a road or not? Pretty much self-explanatory. Do we line it up with the road or not? Is farm is not used anymore? Maybe we might remove that, or we might find a use for it. We'll see. Placement, this determines how far, certain buildings you're not going to want to have near the city center. So a factory you're not going to want to have downtown. So this makes sure that any factories are placed at least 12 hexes away from the city center. You can also make sure that things are close by to the city center by saying near. Dense. This is ignored right now. We've got a setting on the building, on the city setup screen that determines, hey, do you want your city center to be a little bit denser or not, instead of doing it by individual buildings. And the remove allows you to remove an entry from the row here. So that's what this is, and there's going to be a couple of additions added to this list here before we put the release out, but you get the idea there. The other important thing to point out while I'm going over that is to say that with your population, what it does is after it's figured out these particular buildings to add, how many of each of these particular things to add, then it's going to fill in the rest with regular houses and or other things that you put in this particular line over here on other info. And so we'll be making this so that it doesn't allow duplicates. But anyway, you want to have structure modern house. And there's structure modern house A, B, C, D, E, F in the system. And so doing this here will allow any of those. It'll randomly pick, so it'll determine based on the population of 5,000 that, hey, we need about 1,000 or 1,500 or however many additional buildings, and then it will randomly pick all of those modern house icons, A, B, C, D, however many there are in the system, and it'll it'll randomly pick one for each of those 1,000 that it decides to do. And we'll get to the rest of this dialogue shortly, but for the moment, we'll leave it at that. So I'm going to hit just apply, close, and then we're going to go into the new city, town, village map dialog. A couple of other things I want to get out of the way before I do that is this is talking about version 1.134. We did make a couple of fixes to that configure settlement data window that I just showed you in this version, so you're going to want to make sure you're updating to at least this or a later version to use this functionality. If you don't have the latest, you're going to see also this update available. Anytime you see update available, you should go to worldographer.com. This get update info will give you the list of what's changed since you've last updated, and I have it, even though I'm on the latest version, I'm in a development environment, so that's why you're seeing the update available here. But anyway, if you see the update available button, then you'd want to go to worldographer.com /download to get the latest. So, as I was saying, new town, city, village dialog. So, talking about this real briefly, again, we've gone over this in other videos about the Worldographer city, village functionality. This just gives you the size of your map in hexes. You can change this here. You are not able to change it after you've created your map if you don't have the Pro version of the tool. The Pro version simply holds back a few features, and expanding an existing map is one of those features. This is your initial size of your hexes. Again, as you just saw with the zooms, I can zoom in and zoom out on that anytime, and that's not a special Pro feature or anything. We can do a blank map. Excuse me. Blank map is useful for going through a different process, which I'll show you, to create your map, which gives you a little bit more control over things, as well as if you just want to place everything by hand. The background texture or color, you can set this. Population, this is the important thing that I mentioned before about if you want to have a denser city center where it tries to pack the buildings in a little bit better, you can check this box. And we'll go ahead and do that just for the heck of it. This is the population size that you want. It's set to 5,000 by default. Does it have a coast? If so, then what's the clock position that we begin at and go to? So this is going to start at 8 o'clock to 1 o'clock, so roughly, on the left side, a little bit down, going across the top of the map to a little bit past the top of the map is where your coast would be if we check this box. Likewise, you can have a river going across and the map, and where does that begin and end? Main roads, this determines where your city center is, kind of the way we think of cities in the tool, and we'll probably add a way to kind of change this so your city center isn't at the center of two roads crossing, but at the moment, that's what we do. Your city center is going to be where two main roads cross. You can control the windiness of that to give it a little bit of variety, so it's not just two straight lines. And then this checking this box would override these values here and make sure that you're getting a perpendicular second road, and it would be exactly perpendicular. Whereas even if we did figure out that, say if we want to do 12 to 6 and 3 to 9 here, there's a little bit of randomness to that, so those two roads aren't going to be exactly perpendicular. If you want it to be exactly perpendicular, then you could check this box and it would make it perpendicular. What your road texture is like, or your color, and in fact we should go to a blacktop since we're doing a modern setting. Do you have a city wall? Not really not really that important for this. What's the street layout like? You can have a very ordered street layout. Very ordered will kind of line up your roads so that they are all parallel to your two main roads. Ordered will only make it parallel to the first road, and then they'll be perpendicular to the other. The other streets will be perpendicular to the first set of streets that run in the first direction. Haphazard gives you a more organic structure, which is kind of like what you see in the background there. The top mini map gives you an idea of that, and branching gives you something actually, this might be branching, what you see there in the background, and haphazard is what I'm going to choose. Just giving you a more organic structure to things. So with that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and generate your initial map, and you can see it's giving us placing all these buildings for us. it already placed the streets. Once this redraws, we would see that happen. But you can also kind of force the redraw. You can click OK and not worry about trying to watch it place all the buildings, and then scroll around and you can see most of the buildings have already been placed, and you see that denseness there. You see the blacktop roads. We can turn off the grid if we want, if we don't want that on. And we can pull up the details. So one of the cool things about this is we can pull up details for all these buildings, and I haven't gotten to that and how that's configured on some of the other tabs that we were looking at there, but we will. So I'm going to pull up Add View Edit Note. I'm going to show the notes. Show Notes just shows you little squares of where to click if you want to pull up the notes. Basically it's in the center of the buildings. This would be just a regular house. Here we've got a couple family members. In this case, we only have one, so nobody else is home, or maybe they're widowed or something like that. Close. Here you can pull up another one. Here you've got two people, and these are dwarven. Now that's because I didn't make some other changes, which we'll be making in the data file before I release it. But I'll show you that shortly. Here we've got an office building here, and here's all the staff here, and we've got all these demi-humans and stuff because I didn't make a change to the data file yet. But we will. Oh, actually, let me pull that up again, and I'm not drag it over here so you can see it better, because I've got a limited window area for recording purposes, just so that the file size of the recording doesn't get too huge. But this gives you an idea of what the dialogue looks like. You can see, you can put in details about what the building is like if you want here, and then here this is all automatically generated by the system. And again, I'll show you how to override some of the settings for the population information there. Close. In fact, so let's go to that. Go to Configure Settlement Data. Come over here. Come to Races. And what we can do here is we can remove these other things. Apply. Close. Now, what I can do is I can go File, New Town City Map. And because it's so instantaneous to create a new map, it's really, really cool in that regard. So there we go. Generate the map. And it's doing its job. I didn't change the setting for the road texture, but you get the idea. Click OK to just jump to it. And we're back here with this, and we can click on this here. So here we've actually got a cafe. It's called the Angry Troll because, again, we're still using some medieval naming conventions for some things. But now if we go to patrons, for example, they're all human, and the staff are all human. So we've got that. Here we've got some drinks that are available at this cafe. Here we've got the food that they've got available. And again, all that data I was about to show you. So now we will. Configure settlement data. So I had shown you the race information a moment ago and how to change this. If I go to building details, this is where all that data is powered from. And so we were just looking at the cafe. So we'll pull up the cafe, and here we've got, so your cafe, that note dialog has a number of tables on different tabs, and so each of these tables has information here. So we have a table for the patrons, and so this is telling us that we've got 1 to 5 groups of patrons, and each group has 1 to 4 people. Now groups are going to have the same the same ethnicity basically, and the chance that they are an adventurer. The chance that they're female, and so we can tweak these settings if we want to. Same thing with the staff that are there. There's another tab with a table for the staff. Drinks. This allows us to add drinks to things, and then the food table, which had the food that's available at this little cafe. So. You can pull up any of these other things. We can go to the office building and see the list of workers and executives and stuff that are there. We can go to the restaurant and pull up all the details for the restaurant here. A much larger list of things that they have. You can clone something. So as I was saying, we can clone a restaurant, and so we can say clone this, and we can say that maybe we're going to add a new type of thing, which is modern restaurant fancy. So all your upscale things we can put here, and now we could tweak all those prices, make them more expensive. We can add in some more expensive dishes, and so forth, as long as we also added some icons to the system that were that had modern restaurant fancy, and you could say A, B, C if you wanted some variety in the look of them, and create several. And then building placement, you would add modern restaurant fancy here if you wanted the system to automatically place those. So that's how that's all done. And you can remove rows, you can add rows to the tables. All that should be kind of self-explanatory, hopefully. But it does get a little bit, it does get a little bit complicated looking at it all if you go back to something that's simpler. So here you've got a grocery store, and they have a patrons and they had staff, and kind of look at this, look at an easy one to kind of digest it all, and then move on to some of the more complicated ones. The fast food one, for example, has a lot of things here. You can remove one of these, you can clone it, you can add a new one from scratch, which doesn't copy over any data or anything, but then you've got to create all the tables and everything from the ground up. So that's that. Races, we already went over. Other info, let me go through this a little bit. So there's a chance that some of your people in your town are adventurer types, and so there's a couple of possible backgrounds if they are. Occupations, what do these people do? Some of these are duplicated on purpose to give us more frequency, because we want to have a modern city. We want to have 4 times the chance of having a modern an office worker as opposed to maybe a sales clerk is also pretty common, but you get the idea that you have less chance of having fishermen maybe as opposed to office worker. Quirks, these are all different personality things that are used for generating people. Structure, modern houses, again, I already went over that about remaining buildings. Naming of your buildings. So as we saw, I think we mentioned that we had a cafe that had a name to it. Fast food places, you can put in specific names, and it'll randomly pick one of these for each modern fast food place that it does. Or you can come up with a naming convention. So you're in, for example. So again, this is legacy from the modern, or from the medieval information that was here before, which will be dropping before we put it out there. But you could do something like this, even for some modern buildings, a shop. So the material coin, so your shop might be called, the ebony coin or the wooden coin or something. But you can also mix and match that. So you can have, some store mart, comma, and then the material coin. So you can have these some custom things, as well as some that use these word lists up here. And if you put any of those words in all caps, it's going to look in that word list and try to find randomly pick one of these matching words. That's what it's trying to do. And if you want to add more, you go to add row, and the dialog appears and asks you, are you adding more as a word list, like up here, this a new type of things that it's going to randomly pull from, or is you doing a new building name? So if we wanted to have like modern restaurant, can do that. And we've got, scroll down a little bit and you'll see modern restaurant added here, and then you can enter some things for that. So let's see, what else am I going to show here? I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I want to make sure I cover everything I can. Oh, one other thing for a modern building, modern city type look of things, you might want to put in some blacktop. So the important thing to remember is all of this is it's all a city map editor. It's all it gives you a lot of controls to make shapes and move features around, move buildings around. So for example, this is a fast food restaurant type thing here, and what we can do is we can say that we want to have a polygon that is has no border, and then has a blacktop texture to it, and then I can click points here, and now we've got basically like a parking lot there that you could, we can actually, if I remove a couple more of these, put a couple back in, we can come all the way to the edge here. But you get the idea that you can have a parking lot. I can start a new one, and if we go around and look for another building type, let me zoom out. It's a little bit easier to. But if we have, there's a strip mall down here, so perfect. So if I zoom into the strip mall, basically, we can now say, all right, let's put in a parking lot for this strip mall. Maybe I don't like that last point, so I want to move it a little bit. There. So you get the idea that you can do all these kinds of things. The notes thing is always something you can turn off. It kind of gets annoying to see those yellow squares in the middle of things when you're not looking for something. But the filter is pretty helpful, because we can actually put in there a part of the name of a building, show the notes, and it's going to help us find those. So if you're wondering, which of our buildings are cafes, I can type in cafe there. I can zoom out, and now I know that this one here is cafe, and we can pull it up, and we can get the list of drinks that are available, and food, and patrons, and staff, and whatever other details you want to write into this general details tab about the building. And again, you can see that the name, it generated a name, Yelling Blade, again, because it's still using the medieval information for that at the moment. But that will be updated before we release it. Okay. Other stuff. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to explain is that you can also generate a city in a step-by-step process. And you go up here to the generate. If you picked that you wanted to create a blank map, then you can say generate coast, and it's going to bring up a dialog that allows you to put down a coastline automatically, and then you can tweak it from there. And that's really good, in particular for streets, because I can put down the street network, and then I can change the streets around a little bit, find some things that maybe don't fit, or make some larger areas for some larger building types, and then go to generate place buildings and place them. And each of those dialogues have similar controls to what's on the front, on the initial create a new city dialogue. So you have that there. Other things that maybe I've forgotten to mention, again with the licensing and the version number, if you get the Pro license for Cityographer, you want to go over here to check Update City Village License in order to install that. The initial prompt that comes up for you when you are using Worldographer without a Pro license is for Worldographer itself. But if you have the City Village license, that will also open up the City Village license stuff, Pro features, as well as a few of the other common Worldographer features as well. So I think that covers it. Please do send me messages through support@inkwellideas.com is the best way to get a hold of me, but we'll also have our forum on our website. That's the second best way to get a hold of us. And then, yeah, we try to monitor the YouTube comments and Twitter and all sorts of other ways to reach us, but not as good, not as able to monitor too many messaging platforms. So again, I hope that gets your interest. I hope you are able to make some cool maps with this, and please do send me some feedback. Thank you.